Yes, I did, of course. It being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for Tuesday, November 16th. Note that the mayor is not with us at the moment. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? There being none. Additions or deletions to the agenda for this evening?
Angela?
We have the two items that I emailed around, the planning report from Mr. Howarth to be added under 4.4, and the comments from our chief building official, our septic inspector, our public works director, and our fire chief are also included in that submission to council that also are added under information on 4.4.
Okay, thank you very much. Is everybody okay with adding this information to the agenda? Okay. Mover and seconder, please, for the adopted agenda. Councillor Grimm, Councillor Jacob, all in favor? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for 4.1, Planning Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Councillor Lang, Councillor Jacob. Comments or questions on the minutes? All in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for 4.2, approve short-term forest management plan extension. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Lang. Comments, questions? There being none, all in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, 4.3, County of Renfrew Cannabis Recommendations Report. Councillor Lang, Councillor Broom. Comments or questions? All in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for 4.4, application of consent, Barbara Ann Shield, Alan Hector Shield Estate. Councillor Lang, Councillor Jacob. Bruce, anything to add to this one?
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't. So it's all, you do have my planning report, I believe now. So the information is there. This was a little bit of a unique scenario where a certificate was issued to create that lot. And I'm not sure if you can see the sketch, but it looked like when the lot was created, it didn't include all the parts to the road. So technically this lot was created back in 2010, I believe, and didn't actually have any road frontage. So this application is to correct that and is to add on those lands that should have been included in that severance in that first place. But again, one of these caveats we seem to have one almost every month where that lot was previously conveyed by a severance. You have to allow these two parcels to merge properly, you have to break that original severance first. So there is that added of the 1 square foot needing to go to the adjacent property in this case, because it doesn't actually touch the road allowance. Normally it would be the township that takes over that 1 square foot piece and you add it to an abutting road allowance. In this case, because it doesn't physically touch a road allowance anywhere, that 1 square foot is going to have to go off the originally severed property and be added to the neighbor's property. And then that would allow that part that is adjacent to the road to connect to the previously severed lot, if that's not complicated enough. I hope I explained that correctly, but if has any questions, please let me know.
By all means, are there any questions or comments from members of council on this one? Any other additional comments from staff? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for 4.5, Town of Arnprior notice of public meeting. Councillor Broom, Councillor Lang. Comments or questions? in favor of receiving this information? Carried. Before we proceed, and I'm assuming that Bruce will want to leave now that the planning issues are dealt with. Do we have anybody online that may want to speak to any of the planning issues thus far?
No one has their hand up.
Okay, we'll just give them a second in case they have the same issues with technology that I usually do. Okay, Bruce, thanks very much for joining. Feel free to stick around if you wish to. It's going to be a very exciting. If not, take care and we'll see you the next time. There's no delegations. Mover and seconder, please. 7.1, adoption of previous council minutes. Councillor Lang, Councillor Jacob, comments or questions? All in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Mover and seconder, please, for 8.1, October financial review. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Lang. Anything to add to this, Kelly?
No, I think the report's pretty straightforward. I did receive an inquiry before the council meeting, just for clarification on one of the items in the report, and it was specific to the line item with taxation and just questioning why the year-to-date revenues seem to be so much higher than the budget. But you'll recall that the total taxation that's recorded in the general ledger includes both, well, all three levels of revenue. So that's lower tier, upper tier, and the province. And then later or lower on, about midway down in the report, you'll see where the county and school board portions are being remitted. So there's still one more installment to come out, and that'll bring us closer to them what the budget is for the year.
Any questions from council or comments? All in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Item 8.2, mover and seconder, please. Rebranding new township logo update. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Lang. I guess this is you again, Kelly.
Okay, so again, after we met with council back in September, I went back to the consultant to ask for the suggestions that were kind of discussed and made through the meeting to be incorporated into the new logo. Again, I did receive some clarification regarding the colors, specifically regarding accessibility. So I've reached back out to the consultant. I did hear from her later on this evening, and she is not aware that the logos themselves, the colors in the logos, need to meet accessibility requirements. She's never seen that before. Having high color contrast is more for, obviously, for visual impairment, and when it comes into play is more when it's online, and then that's covered through the branding guideline, and you get into more of the, I'm not going to get totally technical here, but she referred to it as hex colors to ensure that then you're meeting those kind of accessibility requirements. She did provide me with another iteration of the logo that is a deeper contrast, excuse me, to the colors that are even presented. So the green is, they're just more vivid. So if council so wishes, I could bring back that iteration so they can see it. But basically, the feedback I've received from her is she's not aware of there being any legislative requirement for the logo itself to meet accessibility requirements.
Okay, comments. Councillor Jacob.
So the accessibility was my question. More so because many organizations tend to pull the colors that they use in their advertising and in the products that they produce from their
Mhm.
logo. So it's important to make sure that when it comes to those brand guidelines that Ms. Coughlin was mentioning earlier, that we do have that opportunity. Of course, it can be done in secondary and tertiary colors when we're looking at that kind of background issue. But it may be something to consider when it comes to the logo, when we're placing a logo on top of something else. Doesn't necessarily need to be accessible. And what we'll do on the website particularly is behind the scenes, making sure that the alt text is right. But just making sure if we were going to use it in print media, that we do have that consideration, because we don't necessarily want to be adding a fifth or sixth color to the palette that we're using on all of our marketing
Yeah.
with the 3 that we do have in the logo.
Mhm.
Councillor
And
Lang.
yes, and just for.
Sorry, go ahead. Kelly.
Sorry. Yes, so just further to Council Jacobs' comments, that is definitely, the next steps are included in actually developing that kind of brand guideline. And it really then delves down into the deeper levels of colors and use of the logo and color iterations, and the applications in which it's used. So all of that would be covered in there.
Thanks, Kelly. Councillor Lang.
So my comments actually relate to the treasurer's comments. So in a branding guideline document, there will be 2 sections primarily, one for print and one for online. So she will come back with, guidelines for how you display the logo in terms of grayscale and color in print, and how much down you can minimize a logo without losing accessibility or visibility. The same thing for the web. Only on the web, there's a primary consideration on where it sits on a page, on the web page, and that there's no shadowing or anything else that will compromise the look of the logo. So I was just making a comment that the branding guideline will specify all of those criteria for both print and HTML.
Kelly.
Would council like me to bring back the deeper shaded logo just for review, or are they happy with what we see here and we can always, just looking for clarification?
Councillor Lang.
I'm happy with the logo as is. I think it's deep enough.
Councillor Jacob, even though your hand's not raised.
I think if it's council's will to proceed with this one, the colors look good to me from an aesthetic perspective. It'll just be important when we do look at those secondary colors that we have something that we can use in advertising, particularly to make sure that that contrast is high.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Mayor Beckett, would you wish to take over, sir?
No, I just wanted, and well, I will, but I wanted to make sure on the vote here that I'm not in favor of it. I think as everyone knows, I'm not in favor of changing the logo at all. Nor am I in favor of changing the name of the township. I think it's a large expenditure of money at a time that is, I think the council would be better off spending that money on something else. So, but I want it noted in the minutes that I'm not in favor of the logo change, nor am I in favor of the changing of the township name.
Ms. Lee.
So in order to do that, we need to do a recorded vote. So is that what you're asking for?
Well, if it's noted in the minutes that opposed, you need a recorded vote.
Mhm.
Okay, then I'll ask for recorded vote.
Councillor Jacob moved the motion,
Oh,
so
wait,
Councillor
wait.
Jacob,
No, just a second.
Sorry. I think Kelly had wanted to say something prior to the vote.
I just wanted to remind council that with this project, this was approved back in the 2021 capital budget process. And funding for this program was through the modernization grant. And you'll recall a few months back, I brought forward a request to submit an application under intake number 3 for modernization funds. But the key qualifier was the fact that the township had to not either earmark or have already spent the modernization funds that we had received initially. At that same meeting, council earmarked the balance of the funds towards the LED lighting improvements. So by doing so with this project, along with the lighting and what have you, the funds were allocated, which then meant we were in an opportunity to submit an application on the modernization intake number 3. If council chooses to, I guess, rescind their decision on allocating the funds for this project, then we would have to notify Whitewater Region that we'd have to pull out of that application that was submitted, because we then have $100,000 of modernization money that's not allocated. And then that would also put us in a position that we might miss out on future funding opportunities because those funds are still not allocated. So I just wanted to remind council of where the funding was coming from, and just to take that into consideration.
Mayor Peckett?
I'm certainly aware of that. Just think it's, and I knew that, and I voted against it way back and when it was allocated way back then, even if the funding was coming from the province, still think the money could have been spent on something better. So I'm just sticking to my original opinion. What council decides to do with it is entirely up to them. Still think something like one of those electronic signs out in front of the new building would be much better expenditure of the money, but or some of the money, but council can do what they want. I just want to make sure that I'm on the record somewhere that I'm not in favor of spending that money, whether it's our taxpayer. Well, it is our taxpayers' money. It's just coming through the provincial government. So I just want to make sure that that I'm not. It's noted that I'm not in favor of it, whether it's coming from the province or which our taxes go to them as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Broome?
And as you know, I've been up and down on this right from the get-go. And I spent a great part of today speaking with the CAO about it. And the reason why I will be voting is that I don't believe that we should be pulling out of other contracts. Name change, I don't agree with. And like the mayor said, we could have easily spent this somewhere, I believe, better location, but yeah, it's kind of the way it was explained is it's a little bit too late to do anything now.
Councillor Jacob?
Yeah, as council's aware, I've supported this project since the beginning, and I think it's a great opportunity for us. Not only to do the logo, given that the logo aspect was provided for free, it wasn't using the funding provided by modernization. But we do have the requirement to review our website and ensure it meets accessibility guidelines. So a large chunk of that modernization funds will of course be going towards that project, incorporating the new logo and brand guidelines. But that's one aspect of why I'll be supporting it. However, I do agree with Councillor Broom and Mayor Peckett. I do not support the proposed name change at this time.
Councillor Lang?
Me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, I couldn't hear you, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Speak up. I think everyone knows where I fall on this. You know, I was the initial counselor way back in the 2014 to 2018 term who proposed that we have a logo. I do not define the crest as a logo. And so the mayor and I are polar opposites on that, and we have discussed that at length. But anyway, I believe that in the modern 21st century, we need a modern logo. And so I support the logo. I support this initiative as I have all along. The name change, I'm split. It doesn't matter to me about changing the name. It's just a switch of township order. And so I'm not married to the new name at all. It's whatever council decides.
Mayor Peckett?
Thank you. Just have a question. Is the money we've been given, is that going to cover the cost of changing all the, changing and manufacturing the logos for all our vehicles and the reprinting of all our envelopes and letterhead and everything? Is all those costs included in the money that we're getting, or is that something the township's going to have to pay for?
So I've received an estimate from the consultant for the balance of the work, things like putting together the rebranding guideline, developing letterhead, and all of the other things that are going to go along with the balance of the project. And that's kind of high end would be coming in about 20,000, which means there's going to be $80,000 left to take care of putting logos on, buying stationery, buying envelopes, looking at if we need to get new uniforms, new signage, all of that. So there's a pretty big chunk of money that's left to deal with that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Lang?
Just a comment, I don't think we have to change every vehicle, you know, right, like change everything at once. You know, I would think that we could do it in phases, you know, as we acquire a new vehicle or whatever, then we apply the new logo. I believe that the town of Arnprior did that in a phased approach, which is far more cost effective than redoing every vehicle, etc., at once. I could be wrong.
So I guess my question is, although I haven't provided my opinion, would people prefer just to stick with Township of McNabb Braeside instead of McNabb Braeside Township? Flip it in the logo? That eliminates the name change. Ms. Lee?
Sorry, I hate to be that policy person, but this report is strictly just on the logo. And obviously, if we don't do the name change, then the logo will still be that picture, just with the name the way that it needs to be. So right now, we're just talking about the logo itself. Sorry about that.
Pardon me, Ms. Lee, but I thought that the name was part of the logo. Because I'm neither here nor there on the name change either. Ms. Lee?
I have a lot to say today. So the only reason that we even brought that part forward is because it was brought up at the last meeting about the just switching where the township was in the name. And the only reason we brought it forward is because if we wanted to do it, now is the time. Well, we're gonna be getting all of the new letterhead and logos and signs and whatever. That's the only reason why we brought that forward now. I don't think if we weren't doing the logo, then it wouldn't be a discussion, I don't think.
Okay. So placement of the word township aside, in the current logo, are we prepared to have a recorded vote on the logo itself?
Yep.
Okay. Angela?
You do want to
Do
record
you
the
know the
vote?
order?
So Councillor Jacob moved the resolution. So Councillor Jacob, in favor of the resolution?
In favor.
Councillor Brum,
In favor.
Councillor Lang,
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Armston,
In favor.
Mayor Peckett.
Against.
Motion carried 4-1.
Thank you. Mayor Peckett, are you wanting, sorry, to take over as chair?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. My apologies to council for being a little late this evening. I was attending a meeting in Pembroke in regards to the 2022 Winter Games that is coming to the county of Renfrew in exactly 100 days. And that was the theme of the meeting tonight, 100 days to go. A lot of information there this evening, of which I will fill council in at a later date, but that's where I was and why I was a little bit late. So my apologies for that. And I'll move on to 8.3. I believe that's where we are at this point. And it's the McNabb Center Park building replacement, the design, tendering, and project management. I need a mover and seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Armstrong, Councillor Broom. Mr. Furr, are you speaking on this one?
Yep. So the recommendation is that Council of the Township of McNabb Braeside award the design, tendering, and project management contract for the new McNabb Center Park building to JP2G Consultants for a cost of $47,435 plus HST. So Council is aware that the township submitted a funding proposal back in 2019 for this project. It took a while, but we did hear back this summer that we were successful. So the township received approximately $215,000 grant from the provincial and federal government. So this is the first step to getting the design completed for this project, so that it can be go out to tender early in the new year. We're anticipating March for a construction start of August next year in 2022.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Just a couple of comments. You know, the design is extremely functional, based on my experience in using the site on more than one occasion. I have a question, and I'm assuming I'd rather ask the question than assume, sorry. I'm assuming that McNabb Braeside Minor Ball has had some significant input into the layout and the types of usage in the various spaces. It seems to take into account what I personally think is required of the space, but I just wanted to verify that that Minor Ball, who is one of the major users of the space, has been consulted on this.
Mr. Furrow, please.
Yeah, so through the Recreation Department, they did reach out to Minor Ball, and this is the layout that was provided in this report was from the feasibility study that we did complete in 2019. So they did take a look at this and were comfortable with the layout, and the inclusion of the tournament room was kind of one of the when we did the funding proposal was one of their recommendations. They did suggest, based on this, that a slightly larger tournament room might be of benefit to them. So that will be things that we will look at when we go through the design process with the selected consultant and make sure that they're, satisfied with all the inclusion of all the different rooms.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. Thank you. We're on to 8.4, Braylock Road, road surface design and consideration. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Broom, seconded by Councillor Jacob. Questions or comments? Mr. Furrow?
So my report is loading. But basically I'm looking for staff direction with regards to the surface requirements for Braylock Road. So it's fairly straightforward for the section between McLean and Stevenson. It is a section that sees, fairly high levels of traffic. In our last study, it was in the high 800 vehicles per day. So that section we were looking at, ensuring that it had a sufficient base and asphalt thickness that can support that, as well as a widened platform to provide, provide a surface for, bicycling and active lifestyles. So that section has been, discussed in the past, and we're fairly comfortable with that, as well as the section between Stevenson and Shield would be a single lift of asphalt replacement. However, the section between Shield and the rest of Braylock Road, which kind of continues through kind of the bush section, which is currently gravel, we're looking for direction from council as to if this is something that we could, based on the current construction of the roadway. It's a fairly narrow section. The platform of the road would need to be widened out a fair bit in order to get a 3-meter paved lanes plus shoulder. As well, that section does show some signs of more movement with the frost in the existing surface treatment. That is something that we've seen in the past with some of our roadways, is that the cracking does come through, as we're not capable of removing all of that frost susceptible material just based on cost. So with those kind of two conditions, the cost savings that we would see if council would be, in the position to look at changing this section of roadway from the existing surface treatment back to a gravel surface that would be maintained into the future. There are currently two residents or two homes that are along this section that have surface treatment right now, and the rest are gravel on that section. So that's basically what we're looking for council direction as to if this is something that we should pursue further and to just maintain as a gravel section. the current traffic count on that section is only about 120 vehicles per day. So it is a fairly low volume seen on that section.
Thank you, Councillor Lang, please.
I was just going to say that I thought it was a really well done report, Mr. Frew, and your suggestions or rationale for option 3, I think it makes a lot of sense to me. So I would certainly support, I think option 3 makes the most sense economically and in terms of road maintenance going forward.
Councillor Jacob.
I concur with Councillor Lang. I think option 3 is probably the best option at this point, given those lower traffic volumes. But of course, it'll be important as we move forward to have those conversations with those affected homeowners, just to make sure. I know that they were consulted in the original report by the consultants that provided it, but just to make sure that they understand the rationale behind it, if that is how council decides. The other important thing to note, and it was a question that I asked the Director of Public Works earlier today, is in relation to the financing piece. This project, based on the estimates provided in the consultant's report, is approximately 500,000 over what was included in the 2020 long range roads plan. So this would be a consideration, of course, when we get to budget time, but seeing even this little bit of savings would be helpful as the township plans for the reconstruction of both this road as well as the village of White Lake in the upcoming budget cycle.
Okay. Any other comments? Just have a couple. First of all, I would really like to once and for all correct the spelling of Braylock Road. It's not one word. It's 2 words, according to the signs. But we continually, I'm getting nitpicking here, but it's, I guess if something ever happened and there was a lawsuit and the road was named wrong or something, the suit could be a way out. But I think in our reports from here on, we should actually name it properly. The other thing is from Shield to the bush is surface treated, Mr. Frew, which is chip and dip. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And you're proposing to change that to gravel?
That would be the surface type that we would be recommending. Yeah.
And then from the bush area through is gravel. So
that's correct.
Just for everyone's information, I've had more than one resident on the road asking when their road is going to be, the gravel section is going to be fixed in one way or the other away from gravel. So I'm not sure whether it would be prudent to just this year go to Shield Drive and the following year maybe go to surface treated for the next longer portion of Braylock Road, and maybe the year following another section of it surface treated. And I understand what you're saying about the frost and stuff. But we have that everywhere, and if the frost is bad enough to break up the gravel, it'll certainly break up the surface treated. But at least the chip and dip area would be much better for the residents. As far as the big complaint is dust, and then of course every time it rains, the potholes come and it has to be graded. Now, having said all that, we do have a new grader. It's the getting the time to keep all our gravel roads graded. So that's just my comments on that. Leave it up to council as to what they feel we should do. Even maybe you could even break it up by going to the first Stevenson Road, from McLean to Stevenson Road next year, and then going down further with the other part of it the following year. The really bad part and the heavily traveled part is from McLean to Stevenson. And Mr. Frew has certainly addressed the problem there with the traffic. And a large amount of that traffic is heavy trucks. They're just continuous, and they just pound that road every day. And if we just go with a single layer of asphalt and without hardened shoulders, it will be broken to pieces in 2 or 3 years. We'll be back having to put in major repairs. So I commend Mr. Frew for setting up that much more robust design for that section of the roadway. So I'll leave it at that. Councillor Brew.
Just speaking for experience, if you were to change that over to chip and dip, you're looking at a substantial amount of money. Number one, you've got to cut back the trees, you've got to create ditches, you've got to go down. It's not got a good base on it back in there. You're probably looking at a couple $2 million in today's market. And that's if we luck out. I know what people are saying, that, you know, to try to move ahead and chip and dip, but that's going to be everywhere from Mr. Smith onwards. Hasn't really got that good of a base that I've seen. You know, you've got to dig down probably 3-4 feet if you're going to chip and dip in there. And I think you're just opening a can of worms. Unfortunately, it's going to cost a significant amount of money to change that, even to chip and dip, let alone to put asphalt through there. That's just my 2 cents.
Thanks for that information. Appreciate it. So perhaps the area now is from Shield to the bush is chip and dip. I'd be interested to know how long that chip and dip has been there, because it's in pretty bad shape. But I would suggest that it's been there 15 to 20 years. Or longer. See, I've been living up here since 1993, and I don't recall anything ever being done at the end of that road since I've moved here. So if not, it's already chip and dip that area, and if we've got that many years out of it, perhaps that section could be done over and chip and dip. And if we get another 15 years out of it or 20 years out of it, I think that would make our residents much happier. Mr. Frew, please.
The difficulty with the chip and dip is that typically for cost effectiveness, it's done in large quantities, just because of the setup and to get the equipment to site. Typically it's done for, you know, long stretches and long sections. This would only be a 400 meter section. I know that, you know, as part of the budget for next year, we would, as you had mentioned, to fit in a lot of the other projects, we were anticipating breaking this project into phases and potentially looking at the McLean Drive to Stevenson section next year, and then the remainder in the following budget. So this section, you know, ultimately what is done can be likely decided at a future meeting if a council desires. However, it's just to, if there is a clear consensus, then that would allow us to finish off the design drawings for that section as well, so that we would have it ready, right? So the longer the decision is to for that surface type, then we just have to delay when we'll have that section's design complete, which may result in some additional costs for the design consultant.
So if I'm understanding, if we just went as far as Stevenson in 2022 and left from Stevenson to the bush till 2023, we could possibly put the one layer of asphalt from Stevenson to the bush. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, that's clearly possible. It would just be, as outlined in the report, there are significant cost savings and potential, maintenance savings with keeping that section from Shield to the bush in gravel. So that was the decision put forward to council, is if that's something that council would prefer to explore further. Just because it is a change in surface type from going from a hard surface to gravel. It's best to have council's feedback and their input as to if that's something that they would like to explore. And
But that's been done in other areas of the township. For example, would be the golf course road. There wasn't enough money years ago to pave the whole thing, so they paved two ends of it and put chip and dip in between, and then when they got more money, they paved it.
yeah, this decision was not so much a temporary decision. It would be for the long term, as to this is what's going to be utilized for the future. I could see us proposing to council to pulverize and similar to Millridge, the entire section of Braylock next year, because the surface treatment is pretty much completely broken up and costing significant amount in patching. So similar to Millridge, we pulverized it the year before, maintained it in a gravel surface for a year, anticipating that the work would be completed the following year. That's something similar that we would be looking at for this road. However, my recommendation or my report tonight would be council's direction as to what would be the final configuration for that south portion. If it would be, after all the work is completed, would this section remain in a gravel state, or would we be looking to have it, asphalt paved along with the rest of the section of Braylock?
Councillor Brown, please.
Has there been coring done there, Mr. Fru?
Yeah, so there was several boreholes drilled in that section. So there was, a small layer of gravel, which was kind of typical throughout. And that section showed a bit more traces of clay and such in the sublying base material. So that's sort of what we looked at, along with the surface condition. The kind of large longitudinal cracks that we see through that section are kind of a sign of that frost cracking that we've seen on some of the other roads, or on Shield Drive and some of those other sections that have similar cracking.
Councillor Brown.
If that's the case where you've got a significant amount of clay in there, I would not vote to pave it. It's going to look worse than what my road does 6 months after one hard frost, and it's just gonna pop a single layer of asphalt very quickly. So I think we'd be throwing good money after bad. So I would definitely say 2022 to do up to Shield and then, or Stevenson, my bad. And then look forward, is it only in some spots that we have some clay? Can we dig down 2 feet and, maybe do surface treatment from there over to the bush line? With there being, such a low amount of vehicles through there. Personally, I think we may even be able to get away with chip and dip so long as it's, set up properly. We have a good base. I think that might be our cheapest way. Again, personal opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments? So I guess we have to make a decision are we going in 2022 from McLean to Stevenson and leaving the rest, or are we going from McLean to Shield and then pulverizing the rest of it and leaving it as gravel? I saw Councillor Jacobs' hand and then Mr. Frew.
So my comment may be very similar to the one that Mr. Frew would like to make. It's just a question for clarification through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Frew. The purpose of this report tonight is solely the portion of Braylock Road from Shield to the Bush. And the splitting of the project, should that be decided, my guess would be a decision that would come to council as part of the 2022 budget. And that in terms of the plan that's proposed in the report, it would be an asphalt surface from Shield all the way up to McLean, and then just that portion south of Shield would be the gravel surface, correct?
Yes, so that's correct. So any of the decision-making regarding which phases would be completed in which years was something that we would anticipate occurring during the budget discussions. This report was just to get feedback from council regarding that section south of Shield Drive. If it's something that, because we're working through the design for this roadway, getting the design drawings completed, and we were looking for direction as to how to finish off those drawings. If we would do it with showing an asphalt surface, or potentially a gravel surface, or the third option is not including that within the construction contract totally, and the township undertake whatever work is required for that section. So that was the direction that I was looking for this evening, was specifically for that section from Shield to the Bush line. And if there is a change in surface type from the existing, that should occur.
Councillor Jacob.
Just as a supplementary, thank you, Mr. Frew. I would support staff's recommendation to proceed with option number 3, changing the surface from its existing structure to a gravel surface.
Councillor Brown.
Without putting a significant amount of money into the base, I agree. Gravel's your best bet right now. Unless we get a windfall of an extra $1 million, then we can look at improving the base. But as this base sits right now, I wouldn't support even doing chip and dip on it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
So the reality is, south of Shield, we're just really in planning phase right now, regardless. The area north of Shield, we are designing with a plan to pave next year north of Shields. So the risk of proceeding one way or the other south of Shield is relatively low, given that if we make a course correction down the line, it's a matter of redesigning the southern portion of, like you said, Mr. Fruit's about 400 meters. So I'm not sure that we can make a bad decision on this at the moment, given that there's no immediate plans for construction south of Shields. So I'm relatively indifferent to this, because if we hear significant feedback from the residents, or if we get additional input, we can always make a course correction south of Shield regardless.
Thank you. Agreed. So as the recommendation was provide staff direction. So I guess the staff direction is to go ahead with paving from McLean to Shield, and gravel from Shield to the bush at this point. And come budget time, we may pull the paving of Braylock from Stevenson to Shield. Okay, everybody in favor of giving that staff direction? She has not. Okay, you have your staff direction, Mr. Fruit. Thank you. We're down to information items. Ministry of Transportation amendments to the Highway Traffic Act hours of service. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Broom. Are there any questions on this? All in favor of receiving this information? Carried. Thank you. The 9.2, the OREB news release, October 21st. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Jacob, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. There's information there. Questions, comments? All in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Thank you. Unfinished business, 11.1 OPP policy change, accidental 911 calls, mover and seconder. Councillor Broom, Councillor Lang. Good information to have. They've certainly made quite a change there. I think that will help us save a bit of money anyways. All in favor of receiving his information? Carried. Thank you. Under new business, 12.1 Claybank Nature Park for outdoor learning. There's a recommendation. Mover and seconder, Councillor Lang, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. This was a recommendation to change the name of the park from Claybank Park to Claybank Nature Park for outdoor learning. Any questions or comments? I think this is really a good thing for the township and for the park. And again, thanks to Councillor Lang, this project is moving forward and is already being talked about in many areas of the township and out of the township. And It's moving along quite nicely. So thank you, Councillor Lang, for all your diligence and hard work on that project. All in favor of changing the name? Carried, thank you. 12.2, Conrad Koulis requests to purchase closed road allowance. Dixon Road, mover and seconder. Councillor Jacob, Councillor Broom. Mr. Frew, we basically have a policy on that, do we not? Or we've had in the past, maybe Ms. Lee, have we not had a policy that we are not selling road allowances? Mr. Frew?
I'm not sure on the policy front. I know that each kind of request has been looked at separately on its merits and decisions made based on staff feedback, at least to my knowledge. I know that this request had come in some time ago, I do believe, and I had looked at it. And based on Dixon Road, the top section of Dixon Road is really, an kind of developed road. It doesn't have defined ditches, doesn't have or hasn't been reconstructed at any point. Therefore, my recommendation would not to be to retain this road allowance. There's potential for utilizing it for drainage, or potential drainage into the future if that work has ever is proposed to be completed on Dixon Road. So it allows us a natural outlet for that water to outlet. So based on this request, I would my recommendation or my determination from what's out there existing now is that the township retain that road allowance and not just sell it at this time.
Questions or comments? Councillor Broom?
I went for a drive and I agree with Mr. Frew, the whole ridge potentially, well, some of it already drains there right now. So to sell that and have nowhere to take our water, which is, one of our biggest issues of the township, I know I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Jacob?
Just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to either the CAO or the deputy clerk. My assumption is this is coming to council with the applicant's desire for kind of a pre-consultation in lieu of filing an actual application under the sale of land policy. Is that correct? Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so I guess staff direction, Ms. Lee, would be to send a notification back to Mr. Koulis that the township is not interested in selling this particular piece of road allowance. Okay, Mr. Frew, no. Okay, all in favor of the staff direction? It's carried. Thank you. .3, regular council meetings amend the start time. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Broom, Councillor Lang. This was just something that I threw out a couple of meetings ago. Why we were waiting till 7, especially very shortly as we'll be live streaming. When would that be, Ms. Lee? Sometime in January? I understand the equipment and everything has been ordered. And hopefully by January sometime, we'll be live streaming council meetings. So I'm just wondering if council is interested in starting at 6 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock. It also makes a shorter time for staff who, are off at 4:30, and then some have to stay around till 7 o'clock for the meeting time, or go home and return. Just a suggestion, questions or comments? Councillor Jacob.
I do support the change, particularly now that planning matters have been included on council's agenda. What would typically prolong a meeting potentially into the evening, depending on the discussion on the planning issues. I think it's a great idea to move the meeting time forward. My only question, potentially through you to the CAO or the deputy clerk, when it comes to public meetings, I know typically we would schedule those before a PAC meeting. And now that PAC is part of council, if we were scheduling 2 or 3 of them, which sometimes has happened, my assumption is we'd probably be starting around 5 then. Is that an issue for staff? Does that provide enough time?
CAO Lee, please.
It wouldn't be an issue for staff. And I mean, if there was gonna be too many in one night, we can also just hold it on another night. If we were gonna have too many and have to have it even before 5 o'clock, we could always have them on a different night. But 5 o'clock wouldn't be an issue either for any of us.
Perfect, thank you.
Question, any further questions? Anyone see a problem with doing this? Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
I personally, and I'm being selfish when I say this, right now, I don't have an issue with it. Because I've been working from home for the last 18 months. But if I ever returned to the office and had to make it back for potentially a 5 o'clock meeting or 4:30 meeting, it might prove to be somewhat difficult, but just like everything else, what is done can be undone if the situation changes. So I don't have an issue with it right now, sir. Just food for thought if and when life ever returns to normal.
Okay. So let's there is a recommendation to begin this starting in January 2022. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. .4, the Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, November 14th to the 20th. Moved by Councillor Broom, second by Councillor Jacob. There's a recommendation. Ms. Lee, please.
So this is one of those times where I'm just kind of begging for forgiveness because it started before. We didn't get it until just last week and it started this week. So we kind of already did it. And hope that everyone's okay with it.
Does anyone on council have a problem with the fact that we've staff has already started this? I don't have any kind of a problem with it. It's something and just the timing wasn't right and when it had to be done. And I certainly don't see any problem with supporting this totally. Unless there's any further questions or comments. So Ms. Lee, we would just have to support or receive this as information as it's already been done, or we have to vote in favor of staff's recommendation or
Yeah,
staff's-
you still have to vote on
All
it.
all those in favor of staff's recommendation? It's carried. Thank you. There are times when things come into council and into the office where the timing just doesn't work, and you just have to go ahead and do certain things. So we're down now to bylaws. 14.1 bylaw 2021-79, the debenture bylaw for the pumper tanker fire truck. Over in seconder. Deputy Mayor Armstrong, Councillor Lang. Questions or comments? All in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you. 14.2 bylaw 2021-80 procedural bylaw. There's a couple of little changes in there, moved by Deputy Mayor Armstrong, second by Councillor Broom. Any questions or comments on the minor changes that have been made? All in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you. Any members of public in attendance that wish to ask questions on any of the proceedings here this evening?
Nobody has their hands up.
Okay. Just give a couple of seconds. Okay, there's no closed meeting. Item 17, you see all the meetings upcoming in December. Please take note of the special budget meetings and the different times. I'm sure they've all been posted for the public. Unless there's something else from council, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Broom, Councillor Jacob, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you very much. We're adjourned. Take care.